Okay, but very good. Okay, got it. Let's try sharing again. It says I can't while someone else is sharing.
Oh, yes. Sorry. There you go.
Okay, very good. And share and oh, okay, portion of screen. I'm gonna go there. And then let's see if this works. There we go. And let's see, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do presenter review. How about that? Okay, so are people getting just the first slide? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good. God bless technology. So the question was posed, how do you create Torah art? How do you look at these stories and feel these stories and somehow make art about it? I've been doing that for lots of years, since really the late 70s. Pretty much from that very time, the reason why I do this and how I do it is because the Torah stories annoy me. They really do. They are problematic. Oops, we don't want to go there. This is not automatic. There we go. There are many of them. I don't see the narratives in the Torah piously. I see them as challenges and as problems, and they're problems to be solved by me as an artist and as by being a conscious, moral human being, modern person. And one of the earliest narratives that really annoyed me was Akedah Yitzhak. I don't have to tell you why. It's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. Now, of course, we do all sorts of great things with it, and it kind of saves us, right, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but it's terrifying. And so I started painting Akedah Yitzhak, and then as I looked at it a little bit more, I looked at it and realized it has consequences. And so it has consequences on this little thing called a marriage, the marriage between Abraham and Sarah. Sarah, the problem starts out with the narrative in so much as that Sarah is defined as barren. This is practically the same breath that God says, oh, and Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation and great people. Well, how does that work? And so essentially, she tries to fix it by giving Abraham Hagar, which kind of really doesn't fix it because Hagar's a bit of a problem. This is not to criticize Hagar, God forbid. I've done an entire series of paintings on Hagar. I have nothing but respect for her. But initially, this is introducing another woman into the relationship. So here we go. And well, you know the text. I don't need to read this to you. So the solution to the problem of Abraham becoming a father of a nation initially is Hagar, who will give him a child. But this really just piles it up on a bad marriage. So here, I'll read these. So first of all, there's God says, go down to Eretz Yisrael, right? All very good. And immediately God sends a famine. Great. So now Abraham goes down to Egypt because he's terrified. And he immediately passes off Sarah as his sister, which is kind of disastrous because she almost gets raped by Pharaoh because of that. He doesn't seem to learn about this. He does the exact same thing with Avimelech. Okay, so then later on, as the narrative goes on, there are three strangers. They arrive at their tent, and Abraham runs, tells Sarah, go fetch some fine meal for these guys and fix them a nice meal. As if Sarah, this matriarch, doesn't know how to take care of guests. This is insulting. So then a little bit further on, Abraham's told by God that Sarah will miraculously have a child at 90 years of age. Guess what? He doesn't mention it to her. So when it's proposed, when she is present, right, and God says, the angels say she's going to have a child, she laughs because no one's bothered to tell her that she's going to have this miraculous child. And then, of course, God gets rather annoyed at her. So what kind of way is this to treat your wife? And then, of course, the thing that really just drove me crazy is that in the middle of the night, he hears God's voice, go set your son, take your son, your only one, and offer him on a mountain. And he gets up early. Those words stuck in my craw because he gets up early. It didn't say, and he turns to his wife and says, guess what God told me? No, he just runs out of the house. And in fact, that particular thing is what I would maintain practically very likely kills her. And it's not just me, of course, it's Rashi. So anyway, here's the 16 paintings I did back in, finished them in 2008 on Sarah's trials. So first, you know what, I'm not going to read these. You can read them just as well as I can. And we're going to go through the paintings and you'll see what I did with this. To give you an idea of the scale of these paintings, each painting is 5 by 6 feet. 6 by 5 feet. And you see about how large they are. And this is the first iteration of for me really tackling this. What's the story with this marriage? And how can they move forward? So, and it's done in 8 diptychs, a total of 16 paintings. So the first diptych is on the left is the idol shop, and the second one on the right is smashing the idols. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, that's the prequel. The prequel is that the Midrash tells us that Terach, Abraham's father, was an idol maker. And then the Midrash goes on and says that, now remember, Abraham of his own accord, quote, discovers God. He figures out that there must be only one God. And he sees his dad is making these idols. And so here's a picture of the idol shop and some details of the idols. But I want you to notice these idols are all female idols. I do that because in my mind, the idolatry of the time was certainly dominated by a matriarchy. This is no secret, you know, there's Venus and Ishtar and all these female idols because the female is enormously important in terms of keeping a society going and procreation, et cetera, et cetera. And so even though the Midrash doesn't say it, I maintain that the idols that he mainly made, he probably made some male idols, threw them in there a little bit for those who'd like that sort of thing, but it's the female idol. But what does Abraham do? Well, Abraham, he says, I'm not sticking around for this. This is ridiculous. And so there's a whole midrash talks about a woman comes in with a plate of food and wants to give it to the idol, and he says, you know, how can you be trying to feed these things? They're simply made of wood. And then there's the whole midrash that talks about then after he smashes the idols, naturally his father comes back in, and his father says, "How did you've wrecked me? What are you doing?" And he hands him over to Nimrod, the local king, who decides to actually test Abraham by throwing him into the fiery furnace. But Abraham, of course, survives. Anyway, all of this is the backstory of what's Abraham's problem with his wife. He has a problem with the feminine. He doesn't fully understand the role. And of course, in his theological mind, the feminine is the challenge to his non-gendered God. And that's where this goes. So moving right along. I'm going to quickly do this. So here's the second diptych. This is Sarah Triumphs. Let's see if we can move this up a little bit. There we go.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Wait, this is like a really extraordinary idea that you're posing. That if I just want to make sure I'm like understanding what you're saying. Are you suggesting that the tension in the relationship between Abraham and Sarah in their dysfunction and their non-connection really could have started from deeper roots for Abraham, that he had other gender relationship issues with connecting with the divine feminine or just females in general? And so then when he was married, it was demonstrated in weak conversation and like weak connection.
Precisely. I'm trying, listen, Avram Avinu, right? But look at how he acts. What kind of, this is not a model for Jews. So I want to understand it. But think of his world. Parts of his world is dominated by the feminine, but a feminine goddess. And his own father is making these idols. It's the antithesis to the world that he's discovered of a God that has no gender. And so he can't make sense of it. And that's my understanding of why he kind of messes up with his wife, rather tragically. Moving right along. Okay, so they go down to Egypt. Well, he suddenly notices, if you remember from the verses, he said, "Oh my goodness, you're beautiful. Ooh, and oh, maybe the Egyptians are going to want to take you and they're going to kill me. So what are we going to do? So do me a favor. First of all, if you ever get discovered, tell them that you're just my sister. Not that it's going to particularly help her, right? But that really didn't make sense. But on top of it, he says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put you in a box. And that's how we're going to get you into Egypt. It's hilarious. This is a midrash, okay? It's Midrash Rabbah. Puts in a box, closes it up, and then they get to the customs, the customs inspector, and he says, "Oh, what's in the box? Oh, it's just some things, Well, you need to pay duties on it. Well, okay, it's just some clothing and this and that. And let's see, open it up." But there comes Sarah. Oh my goodness! Wow! And of course, then the worst thing that happens is that they say, "Oh, she's so beautiful. We have to take her to Pharaoh." Very good. Okay, not so good for her, obviously. Let's see. Moving forward. Where I get lost here. Okay, good. So there we go. We have Sarah being discovered in a box at the customs entry into Egypt, and we have Abraham kind of as a clueless chassid, because he really is clueless. He doesn't understand the world, not at all. There she is in a box, all right, with the soldiers. He's on the other side of the border there, and so. Now she is hauled off to Pharaoh's palace for one thing and one thing only, right? Pharaoh, we understand him as a monarch who simply wants to take anything that he wants, has the ability to do so. Remember, he's the most powerful man in the world, and he's about to force her into bed with him, and she cries out. There's another Midrash Rabbah again says. She cries and cries and cries, "God, please help me." And what does God do? God sends her an angel, a very specific kind of angel. It's called the whip angel. This is an angel that has a whip that in fact whips Pharaoh away from Sarah. Tremendous. I couldn't resist this as an image. And of course, it shows that God is in fact protecting Sarah. And now Pharaoh is having second thoughts about accosting this pious woman. So let's see here. Next story. Okay, we're in Egypt. We get out of Egypt. Very nice. And then Sarah decides to try to solve the problem of, I'm barren. We're not having a child. And we know that somehow you've got to be a father of a people. How's that going to happen? Well, I'll give you my maidservant, Hagar. And so the first image is of, let's see here, we'll move it right along, is of Abraham about to walk off with Hagar, and Sarah in the lower right, kind of aghast at how quickly he decides, yeah, this is just a great idea. A great idea. No hesitation with his beloved wife. Well, they were married for at least 10 years, right? No, he decides this is just a great idea. And in fact, we see this young thing, as it were, an older man's dream come true in certain ways. And Sarah really rather shocked at what's going on. And then the next scene is that, in fact, lo and behold, he goes in and has relations with Hagar, and Hagar immediately becomes pregnant. And of course, Sarah's distraught. Yeah, I wanted to help, but he didn't have to be so quick about it. Notice the where we go here. Notice her yellow dress over the chair. So the next scene is the next diptych is when the three angels come and visit Abraham and Sarah, about to tell Sarah that she's going to be pregnant at the age of 90. And here they've simply arrived. All right. And again, he orders her to go make a nice meal for them, as if she doesn't know what to do. Let's see here. Okay, good. All right. Go fetch, indeed. And here is Sarah laughing incredulously. Can this really be the case? I've tried to fix things with Hagar. It's not working. And why is it not working? Here's Sarah laughing, and that's Ishmael, the man in kind of is back to everyone. It's not working because Ishmael turns out not being exactly perfect. So here I've kind of collapsed two things. One is on the left, Hagar is expelled because Sarah just can't take this woman who's now pregnant and kind of lording it over her. And Hagar has her matched luggage ready to go. She's pregnant. But Sarah just says, I just want her out of my sight. This is not going to work at all. Okay. So, and then finally, in fact, Hagar and Ishmael, because it ends up being that, of course, as you all know, that Hagar returns, she has a child, the child starts to grow up and is a real problem. And in fact, Sarah feels she has to protect her family from this child, and even the mother. It's really the child that she's having a hard time with. And so, in fact, here, Sarah is between Abraham and Isaac, trying to protect the family, as down the bottom, you've got Hagar and the wild Ishmael about to be expelled. Now, after this, Abraham gets this voice in the middle of the night. He's in bed. I'm assuming he's in bed, right? The reason I'm saying he's in bed because the next line says, and he got up early in the morning after he heard the voice saying, take your son, your only son. This is, of course, after Sarah miraculously has a child, Isaac, and take your child, your only one, the one you love, rather interesting there, and sacrifice him on the mountain. Now, he's hearing this, and in my imagination, but it's not really my imagination, it seems very logical that he's hearing this in the middle of the night, and he hears God. Oh, I have to get up and do this, right? But he wakes up, goes early, and then Sarah wakes up and says, oh my God, where's Abraham? Where's my son? He's missing. She is absolutely horrified. The next set is Isaac returns after the Akedah. He returns, and there are numerous midrashim that talk about this and say how he ends up telling his mother exactly what almost happened. My father took me up to the mountain. I was to be sacrificed, and God himself stopped it. When she hears that, it knocks her off her feet, and she dies. And as you all know, the famous midrashim that say that her cries are the same cries as the shofar we hear on Rosh Hashanah. Those cries, those gasping notes of despair and pleading, that's what she cries out. So, and Abraham finally mourns his wife, that at least Rashi says that his act of the Akedah is the cause of her death.
This is a really extraordinary idea that you're bringing up here.
Okay, thank you. But tell me what that might mean.
Well, I mean, it's something really extraordinary to consider that there really was a victim to the Akedah.
Oh,
there
absolutely.
really was. It's just that it wasn't the death of Isaac, who everyone thought would die, but rather it's Sarah.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful. I mean, it's so tragically beautiful that it's an act of motherhood and love that she couldn't bear to think that, oh, like my son would be killed.
Right.
And that love, like even the thought of it just like shocked her to death.
Yeah, definitely. I have to tell you, I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm building upon, lots of midrashim about this. Aviva Zornberg sees it in these lights. It's to say, but really trying to make paintings about it and try to explain these paintings is hopefully getting us to reconsider this story and understand it from another dimension, and very importantly, from a woman's dimension. And that's the women in many of the commentaries tend to be invisible. I'm trying to make them visible. The last two paintings, the last two diptychs, are of where Isaac is returned with Eliezer and his new bride, and the midrashically they say she was, I believe, 8 years old. That's this kind of somewhat shocking last scene. And Abraham is sitting there kind of seeing, oh, look what my son did bring home. There's a future for the family. And then the last scene is we return to Abraham. He is the survivor. And what does he do? Well, the Torah is pretty straightforward about him. He returns to this woman named Keturah. Rashi on the spot says that is Hagar. Hagar, who had been exiled, sent out of the house. He returns to Hagar, and in fact, they have 6 children. And of course, we know the end of the story. And well, by the way, all these texts you're seeing next to here, these are all spoken in Sarah's voice. This is Sarah's trials. And so Sarah's voice had to be paramount in this presentation. And when I exhibited these paintings, the text panels always had these words next to them, giving voice to Sarah, even after her death. I finished these paintings. It was probably 2008. I showed them a couple of times, showed them the JCC in the Upper West Side, and also in Brooklyn Museum, Brooklyn College, excuse me. But then I noticed something. I noticed that this was a strange last panel. I said, Abraham returns to Hagar. Okay, that's biblically correct. Men have needs, and so again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. This was Hagar. I just tossed that off, and I thought to myself, wait a minute. There must be something else about Hagar to have Abraham return to her. Why her? She wasn't available. She had just taken her son, Ishmael, off to Egypt to find a wife. That's the last time we heard from her. So why Hagar? And so what I did, only a few years after this, is I painted another set of 16 large paintings on the life of Hagar. And I discovered a lot of things about Hagar that were really amazing. At the very least, Hagar is a survivor of this family. She survives. She founds a people, Ishmael, right? Traditionally, the Arab nations, right? The Ishmaelites. And she is seen, after I worked through these paintings, in a totally different light, one of which being totally revised this painting and this image of her. I suddenly realized, no, Hagar was a woman of color. How do I know that? Well, a little research can tell you she was the Mitzris. She was the Egyptian. Where do the Egyptians come from? They come out of the tribe of Ham, right? From Noah's sons. And in fact, Black Americans see Hagar, Black American women see Hagar as their patron saint. Why? Because she's mistreated by her mistress, and yet she gets freedom. She manages to escape, and she is a proud woman who will go on through history. So I know I'm almost out of my time here. I just want to say that taking a biblical story, a narrative that you initially find troubling and challenging is the best, to me, the way how I get inside of it. And I don't do it by myself. I mean, our sages have written for, over 1800 years about these stories, because they too were troubled and they too needed answers. And so, but it's just a matter of digging and also kind of going with your gut about these stories that have meaning for us, but not the necessarily pious meanings that we want to see them all as heroes and heroines. No, we want to see them as real, living human beings facing rather similar challenges that all of us do, and yet finding their own solutions. So anyway, I hope this has been enlightening. Oh, I do want to show you one last slide. I guess here we go. This is the entire group of paintings, kind of visually as a whole. But I thank you very much for your patience. And also, please, any questions, comments, whatever you like.
I noticed that your beginning paintings, your first couple paintings, I'll say your first 6, the backgrounds kind of, they grow along with your paintings. Like your last paintings that you show after those first 6, they're really much more developed in terms of the background and how they relate to the characters. So I wonder.
I didn't hear the last thing you said. I'm sorry.
Your later paintings after 6
Uh-huh.
really speak to me. The backgrounds seem to connect a lot more with the figures and the layout. Is this on purpose? Is this just how your style developing, or just the story developing through your style?
It's probably just how they developed. I mean, it wasn't on purpose, that's for sure. I worked on this set of paintings over about 2 years. Tried to make them visually. I thought of them as diptychs, so I would paint the two paintings next to one another relatively simultaneously. And of course, I did smaller studies before I did the large paintings. But the quote backgrounds are also influenced by any number of artists that I like, and try to give this structure. I wanted to take these biblical figures and put them into a structure that made sense to me as perhaps even a modern structure. To give you an example, Abraham and Sarah in bed together, right? I'm seeing that as a luxurious high-rise apartment, right, overlooking the city. Again, I tried to see them in places that, if either that I would be able to imagine myself, or that I could imagine a place somebody walking into. They're also very structured, they're influenced by deepen, and even though, all this kind of the verticals and horizontal lines, it's just to try to, again, also hold the narrative in one place.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I don't know, did you say how large these paintings are?
I believe they are, what does it say over here? Let's see.
6 by 5 feet.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, okay. I just want to comment, aside from like the incredible amount of thought and research and that you put into these, they're visually really very beautiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
They are beautiful.
Thank
I'd
you.
love to see one in person someday.
Okay, well, come to my studio. There they are. They haven't been snapped up yet. So yeah, I mean, and it's like I said, I did another set of paintings on Hagar, called Hagar the Stranger, same size, really looking at her life. And I'm currently working on a set of paintings that is just looking at Abraham and Isaac as simply in terms of a father-son relationship, starting with the phrase, "And where is the lamb?" So, but that's in progress. Yeah, thank you.